The envelope was already sitting on the kitchen table when Danny walked in, and I remember thinking how strange it was that a plain white envelope could feel so heavy, resting there between the salt shaker and the stack of bills I'd been avoiding all week. I'd put it there on purpose. He didn't know that yet. He didn't sit down. He never sat down when he wanted something. He stood by the counter with his car keys still in his hand, jingling them the way he'd done since he was 15, and he said it plain, almost bored, like he was asking me to pass the bread. "Mom, I need the retirement money. I already talked to a guy. This one's gonna work, I promise. I just need you to sign." I looked at him for a long moment. 55 years old, standing in my own kitchen in Phoenix, and my son was telling me I owed him the one thing I'd spent 30 years scraping together, one paycheck at a time, in a voice that didn't have a single doubt in it. And then I did something I hadn't quite planned. I reached for that envelope, slid it across the table toward him, and I smiled. I want to stop right there for a second, because if you'd seen my face in that moment, you might have thought I'd finally cracked. That a woman could actually smile while her only child asked her to hand over her whole future. But that smile wasn't happiness, and it wasn't giving up either. It was the smile of somebody who had finally gotten something ready. And to understand what was inside that envelope and how I could sit there so calm while my heart was coming apart, you have to know how the two of us ever ended up at that table in the first place. My name is Karen Walsh. I raised Danny mostly on my own after his dad packed a duffel bag and drove off when the boy was 9 years old. I worked the front desk at a dental office for 26 years, the kind of job where you learn everybody's business and nobody learns yours. And I loved that boy the way you love the thing you almost lost. He'd had a rough start, colicky and small, and I think somewhere deep down I decided before he could even walk that I would never let the world be hard on him if I could help it. That decision felt like love back then. It took me a long time to understand it was also the beginning of everything that went wrong, because here's the part that's hard to admit out loud, even now. Danny is 31 years old, and I have bailed him out more times than I can count on both hands. The car he financed and couldn't pay for, the apartment deposit, the business that was going to change everything, and then the second business that was really going to change everything. Every single time, there was a reason it wasn't his fault. And every single time, I opened my checkbook, because the alternative was watching my son struggle. And I had spent his whole life making sure he never had to. If you've ever loved somebody so much that you kept saving them long past the point where saving them was helping, a kid, a brother, a husband, anybody, then I think you already understand something it took me 3 decades to learn. So if this story is landing somewhere real for you, do me a small favor and hit that like button, and go ahead and subscribe, because I tell these true stories about ordinary people and the quiet moments that change everything, and I'd love for you to stay with me for this one. It matters to me that you're here. Now, that night at the table wasn't the first time Danny asked for money, but it was the first time he'd ever called it something I owed him. That word did something to me. Owed. Like all those years of showing up were just an unpaid bill he'd come to collect. And what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that a few weeks before he walked into my kitchen, I had sat down across from a woman named Ruth in a small office off Camelback Road, and I had signed some papers. The same papers that were now sitting inside that plain white envelope, sliding across the table toward my son's hand. He picked it up. He still thought he'd won. For a moment, neither of us moved. Danny stood there turning the envelope over in his hands, and I watched his thumb find the corner of it and worry the edge, the same way he used to worry the satin trim of his baby blanket when he was small and couldn't sleep. And of all the things to think about in a moment like that, what came to me was the very first time I ever handed that boy money he hadn't earned and told myself it was love. He was 10 years old. His father had been gone about a year by then, and Danny had come home from school quiet in a way that scared me, because Danny was never quiet. It took me half the evening to get it out of him. Some kid had been taking his lunch money day after day, and Danny had been too ashamed to tell me, so he'd just gone hungry through every afternoon for 2 weeks. I remember the anger that came up in me was so big it frightened me, but underneath the anger was something worse, a kind of panic, because his father was gone, and I was all he had, and I could not stand the thought of my son being small and hungry and afraid in a world that had already taken enough from him. So I did the thing that felt like love. I started slipping an extra $5 into his backpack every morning. Not to solve the bully, I told myself, just to make sure he never went without. And it worked, in the way those things always seem to work at first. He stopped coming home quiet. He smiled again. And I never once stopped to ask myself what I was teaching him, which was that when things got hard, money would appear, and he would never have to be the one to make it appear. That is the thing nobody tells you about loving a child too carefully. You think you are protecting them from the world. What you are really doing is protecting them from the muscles they would have grown by facing it. Back in the kitchen, Danny finally looked up from the envelope. "What is this?" he said, and it wasn't really a question, more like he was annoyed I'd handed him paper instead of a checkbook. "I don't need whatever this is, Mom. I need the account. The guy needs a deposit by Friday or the whole thing falls through." The guy. There was always a guy. Over the years, I had heard about so many guys that they had started to blur together into one faceless man who was forever about to change my son's life, if only there were a little more money. I didn't answer him right away. I just told him to sit down, and to my surprise, he did. He pulled out the chair across from me, the one with the wobbly leg he'd been promising to fix for 2 years, and he sat there with the envelope in his lap, waiting, impatient, so certain of how this was going to go that he hadn't even bothered to open it. While he sat there, I let myself go back again, because you cannot understand that Friday deadline without understanding all the deadlines that came before it. When Danny was 22, he came to me needing money for a car. A real one. A grown-up car for the sales job he swore was going to be his career. I co-signed the loan. I told myself co-signing wasn't the same as giving, that he'd make the payments, that this was me believing in him. 11 months later, the calls started coming to my phone, because of course they came to my phone. I was the one whose name was worth something to them. He'd stopped paying in month 4. He hadn't told me. He'd just let it ride, the way he let everything ride, trusting that when the ground finally gave way, I'd be standing underneath to catch him. I paid off that car. It took a chunk of savings I'd been building for 8 years, and I paid it. And when I handed him the title, free and clear, he hugged me and cried and said he didn't deserve me. And God help me, that hug felt so good that I almost thanked him for needing me. That is how deep it went. His need had become the thing that told me I mattered. My sister Diane saw it before I did. She always did. Diane is 3 years older than me, sharp where I'm soft. And she'd been telling me for the better part of a decade that I was going to drown that boy in my own good intentions. I remember one Sunday, years back, sitting in her kitchen while she poured coffee. Neither of us was really drinking, and she set the pot down and looked at me and said, "Karen, you keep filling his tank. He's never going to learn where the gas station is." I laughed it off. I told her Danny had just had some bad luck. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me with this sadness, like she could already see the shape of where all of it was heading, and she said, "It's not luck, honey. It's you. You're his luck." I was angry at her for weeks over that. It's funny, the things that make us angriest are usually the things we're most afraid are true. Because here is what that retirement account actually was, the one my 31-year-old son had just told me I owed him. It wasn't a windfall. It wasn't money I'd inherited or won or married into. It was 26 years of standing at that dental office front desk, smiling at strangers with sore teeth, 40 hours a week, saving what I could when I could, $20 here, $100 there. In a little account I opened the same month Danny started kindergarten because even then, even that young and that tired, some part of me knew I would have to take care of myself one day, since no one else was signing up for the job. That account was my one selfish thing. It was the trip to see the ocean I'd never taken. It was not being a burden on anyone when my knees finally gave out. It was, if I'm honest, the only proof I had that 30 years of putting everyone else first hadn't left me with nothing of my own. And now it was sitting across the table from me in the lap of a man I loved more than my own life, a man who genuinely believed, without a shred of doubt in his handsome, tired face, that it was his. He tapped the envelope against his knee. "So are we doing this or not?" he said. We were. Just not the way he thought. I should tell you about the businesses because that's where the small numbers turned into the kind that keep you awake. The first one, Danny was 25. He'd gotten it into his head that he was going to run a mobile detailing operation, drive around Phoenix in a wrapped van making people's cars shine like new. And honestly, the idea wasn't bad. Danny could sell anything to anyone, always could. It was the following through that never came. He needed startup money for the van, the equipment, the wrap with his logo on it. He sat at my kitchen table, this same table, and he laid it all out with such fire in his eyes that I got swept up in it too. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't asking me to catch him from a fall. He was asking me to help him fly. How was I supposed to say no to that? I gave him $9,000. I told myself it was an investment. The van ran for about 5 months. Then the calls tapered off, and Danny stopped bringing it up. And one day, I noticed it parked at his apartment complex with a flat tire and a layer of dust on the hood. The logo already peeling at one corner. I never asked what happened. I'd learned by then that asking only got me a story, and the stories always ended with it not being his fault. And I was tired of the stories. So I just let the 9,000 dissolve into the long list of things we didn't talk about. The second business was bigger, and it came wrapped in a wedding. Danny married a girl named Nicole when he was 27. She was sweet, a little lost, the kind of young woman who thought his restlessness was excitement instead of a warning. I paid for most of that wedding, of course. 200 people at a venue out by the desert, a band, an open bar, because Danny wanted it to look like he'd made it. And I wanted him to have the day he wanted. And somewhere in there, I stopped being able to tell the difference between what he needed and what I was afraid he'd feel without. 6 months into the marriage, he found the thing that was really going to change everything. Some online reselling setup, buying inventory in bulk and flipping it. With a mentor and a program and a monthly fee, the whole arrangement. This time, the number was 19,000. And this time, I hesitated. I actually hesitated. I remember Nicole calling me, quiet, from their bathroom so he wouldn't hear, telling me she didn't have a good feeling about it, asking me, almost begging me, not to give it to him. She said, "Karen, if you keep paying, he's never going to stop." She was 26 years old, and she understood in 6 months what had taken me 20 years. I gave him the 19,000 anyway. I told myself it was different because he was married now, because he had responsibilities, because this time the stakes were higher, so surely this time he'd take it seriously. Do you hear how a mind like mine works? Every reason to stop, I turned into a reason to keep going. The inventory ended up in a storage unit. Most of it was still there, unopened, when Nicole left him a year and a half later. She sat in my living room the day she came to say goodbye, and she wasn't angry at me. That was the part that broke my heart. She was just sad. She held my hands and she said, "I loved him. I really did. But I couldn't be the next you." I didn't understand what she meant until later. She meant she couldn't spend her life absorbing his falls so he'd never have to feel the ground. After the divorce, I did what I always did. I helped him with the lawyer. I covered 2 months of rent when he fell behind. And I told myself, again, that this was just a rough patch. That a man rebuilding after a divorce deserves some grace. And I gave, and I gave. And my own life got quieter and smaller around the edges without my ever quite noticing it happen. Because that's the thing that doesn't show up in the numbers. It's not just the money. It's the vacations I didn't take because the money went to him. It's the tooth I needed crowned that I put off for 2 years because his rent came first. It's the way I stopped telling Diane the truth about how much I was giving because I couldn't stand the look on her face. It's the man at church, a widower, kind eyes, who asked me to dinner 3 times, and I said no every time. Because how could I build something new when I was still holding my grown son up with both hands? My whole life had narrowed down to being the floor he stood on, and I had done it to myself, one loving, terrible yes at a time. Danny shifted in the chair across from me. The envelope was still unopened in his lap. "Mom, you're doing the thing where you go somewhere in your head," he said, and there was a flicker of the little boy in it, the one who used to tug my sleeve when he felt me drifting away from him. For a second I almost softened. That's the trap of it. Even now, even knowing everything I knew, some part of me wanted to reach across that table and fix his face and tell him it was all going to be fine. But I'd already reached across that table too many times. That was the whole problem. Every time I reached, he never had to. "I'm right here," I told him. "I want you to open the envelope." He rolled his eyes, the way he does, and he said he'd open it after we sorted out the account, like the envelope was some sentimental thing I'd made, and the real business was still the money. And I let him wait, because there was something he didn't know yet. Something that had happened 3 weeks earlier on an ordinary Tuesday that had finally turned all my quiet, loving yeses into a single, unfamiliar word. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to get. The call came on a Tuesday, a little after 2 in the afternoon, while I was at the front desk between patients. A woman's voice, polite and rehearsed, from a lending company I'd never heard of. She was calling, she said, to verify a few details on the application before final approval. And she used my name, not Danny's, mine, Karen Walsh, date of birth, the last 4 of my social, the balance of a retirement account she read off to me like she was reading the weather. I sat very still. I told her I thought there'd been a mistake, and she got quiet in that careful way people get when they realize they've stepped into something, and she said, "Ma'am, you're listed as a joint applicant. Your son submitted the paperwork last week. The account is being used to secure the loan." She asked if I hadn't authorized it. I said I needed to call her back, and I hung up, and I sat at that desk with the phone still warm in my hand, while a woman with a toothache waited 20 feet away, and the whole floor seemed to tilt underneath me. He hadn't asked. That was the thing I couldn't get past. In 30 years of giving, the one thing that had always been true, the thing I'd held onto as proof that we still loved each other underneath all of it, was that he asked, and I chose. It was mine to give. And now he'd reached past the asking entirely, taken my name and my numbers and the one account that was supposed to be my old age, and put it on a form as if it were already his to spend. As if all those years hadn't been gifts at all, just installments on a debt he'd finally decided to collect. I didn't sleep that night, or most of the nights after. I started doing something I'd never once done in all those years. I started looking. I pulled up records. I made a few calls of my own, quiet ones, the way you do when you're afraid of what you'll find but more afraid of not knowing. And piece by piece, it came together. And it was worse than I'd let myself imagine. The deal Danny was so sure about, the one with the guy and the Friday deadline, was the kind of thing that takes a desperate person's money and gives back a folder of promises. He'd already put down what little he had. He'd already borrowed against money that wasn't his. He was standing at the edge of something that was going to swallow him whole, and his whole plan for not going under was me, my account, my name, my yes, whether I gave it or not. There's a particular kind of bottom you hit as a mother, and it isn't loud. Mine came at 2 a.m. at my own kitchen table, this table, with a cup of tea gone cold in front of me, when I finally understood that I had not been loving my son. I had been feeding the exact thing that was going to destroy him. Every rescue had taught him he could not sink, and a man who believes he cannot sink will walk straight into any water, deeper and deeper, because the one person who always pulls him out has never once let him feel how cold it gets. I had spent 30 years and every dollar I had teaching Danny that gravity didn't apply to him. And now gravity had come to collect, and he'd reached for my retirement to pay it, and if I let him, we would both go down together, and he still would not have learned to swim. I called Diane. It was the middle of the night, and she answered on the second ring the way sisters do, and I told her everything, all of it, the parts I'd been hiding from her for years. I braced myself for I told you so. It never came. She just listened, and when I was done, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Karen, you've spent his whole life making sure he never had to grow up. Maybe the most loving thing left is to let him." And I sat there in the dark and cried, not because she was cruel, but because she was right, and because I finally understood that saying no wasn't the opposite of loving him. It might be the last real love I had left to give. That was the morning I called the office off Camelback Road and made the appointment. Ruth's office was small, plants in the window, a diploma on the wall gone a little crooked. She was about my age, steady, the kind of woman who's heard every version of this story and doesn't flinch at yours. I sat across from her and I laid it all out. The years, the businesses, the loan with my name on it, the account. And I told her I needed to do 2 things. I needed to make it so that my son could never again take what was mine without my hand in it. And I needed him to finally see, in plain black and white, the truth about the 2 of us that neither of us had ever been able to say out loud. Ruth listened to all of it, and then she took off her glasses and she said gently, "Karen, you understand this will change your relationship. Possibly for a long time, possibly for good." And I told her yes. I told her I understood that I might be trading the son who needed me for a son who was furious at me, and that I might not get him back, and that I was going to do it anyway, because the version of us we'd been living was already killing us both, just slowly, in a way that looked like love. I signed the papers over the next 2 weeks, and when they were ready, I brought them home, and I slid them into a plain white envelope, and I set that envelope on the kitchen table where Danny could not miss it, and I waited for the next time he came asking, because I knew it wouldn't be long. It was 3 days. And now here we were, the 2 of us at the table, the envelope in his lap, his patience running out, my heart going like a drum. He didn't know any of what I've just told you. As far as he knew, this was going to end the way it always ended, with me caving and signing and hating myself a little more. "All right," he said, finally, tearing at the flap. "Let's see what was so important." And he started to read. The first page was a letter, in my own handwriting, because I wanted him to hear it in my voice, and not some lawyer's. I watched his eyes move across the first lines, and I watched the exact moment his face started to change, that easy confidence draining out of it like color. The letter told him I knew about the loan. It told him I knew he'd put my name on it, my account, my future, without ever once asking me. And then it told him the thing I'd driven to Camelback Road to make true. The retirement account was gone. in the sense that mattered to him. Ruth had helped me move every dollar of it into something locked, something that could not be borrowed against, could not be signed over, could not be reached by him or by any guy with any Friday deadline. Not now, and not ever. It wasn't money he could take anymore. It was a wall. He looked up at me. "What did you do?" he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. And for a second, he sounded exactly like the 10-year-old at the kitchen door with his lunch money gone. "Keep reading," I said. Because there was a second page, and the second page was the one that took me the most nerve to make. It was a list. Every dollar I had ever given him, going all the way back, as far back as my records and my memory could reach. The $9,000 for the van, the $19,000 for the reselling, the car loan I paid off, the wedding, the rent, the deposits, the lawyer, the 2 months here and 3 months there, all of it, line after line after line, down the whole page, with a total at the bottom that I won't say out loud because it still makes my chest hurt. Years of my life, added up in a single number. He stared at that number for a long time, and I watched him understand, maybe for the first time, the actual size of what he'd been standing on all these years. "You want it back," he said quietly. "That's what this is. You're keeping a bill." And there was so much hurt in it, and under the hurt, that old flash of anger, the one that always came when a story stopped going his way. "You said you did all that because you loved me, and now you're handing me a bill. At 55, you're gonna nickel and dime your own son." And here is where I could have broken. 30 years of instinct was screaming at me to take it back, to say, "No, baby, no. Forget the list. Forget all of it. Come here." But I held on to the edge of that table and I told him the truth. "I don't want a dollar of it back," I said. "Look at the bottom of the page." Under the total, I'd written one line. It said, "Paid in full. Consider us even. You owe me nothing." "I didn't make that list to collect," I told him. "I made it so you could finally see it. Because you walked into my kitchen and you told me I owed you my retirement. And Danny, I needed you to understand that if anyone in this room has been carrying the other, it was never you carrying me. But I'm not asking you to pay it back. I'm doing the opposite. I'm tearing it up. It's forgiven. All of it, every cent. What I'm keeping is the wall. The money's off the table. It was always going to be off the table. So that's it," he said. He was standing now, the pages shaking a little in his hand. "The guy needs the deposit Friday. If I don't come up with it, I lose everything, Mom. Do you get that? Everything. And you're sitting there telling me you locked up the one thing that could save me because some lawyer got in your head." "I get it," I said. And I did. That was the worst part, how much I got it. "You might lose it. You probably will, and I'm not going to catch you this time." He looked at me like I'd become a stranger, and maybe, to him, I had. The mother he knew always caught him. That mother was as reliable as the floor. He had built his entire life on the certainty that no matter how far he fell, I would be there underneath. And I had just told him the floor was gone. "You're supposed to help me," he said, and his voice broke all the way this time. "You're my mother." "I am helping you," I said. "For the first time in 30 years, I'm actually helping you. You just can't feel it yet." He didn't hear it. Of course he didn't. You can't hand someone a truth that big and expect them to hold it while they're falling. He threw the pages down on the table, and one of them slid off and drifted to the floor, and he said some things I'm not going to repeat. Things that a son says when he's terrified and cornered and has just watched his safety net catch fire. He said I'd chosen a bank account over my own child. He said he'd never forgive me. He said maybe I wasn't much of a mother after all, if this is what I'd do. Every word landed exactly where he meant it to. He knew me. He knew which stones to throw. And I sat there. and I let them hit. Because I had decided, somewhere back at that 2 a.m. table, that I would rather have my son hate me and grow up than love me and drown. He grabbed his keys off the counter. Same keys, still jingling. At the door, he turned around one last time, and I thought, I actually let myself hope that maybe something had gotten through, that maybe he'd look at me and understand. But he just said, "Don't call me." And then the door shut, and his truck started up in the driveway, and I listened to it pull away until I couldn't hear it anymore. And then it was just me, alone in that kitchen, with the pages scattered on the floor and a cold cup of tea, and the loudest silence I have ever heard in my life. I want to tell you I felt strong in that moment, that I felt free, the way you're supposed to feel when you finally do the brave thing. But that's not the truth, and I promised you the truth. What I felt was like I had just performed surgery on my own heart with my own 2 hands. I sat down at that table, in the quiet, and I put my face in my hands, and I wondered if I had just saved my son or lost him for good. It would be a while before I knew. The silence lasted 5 weeks. 5 weeks of my thumb hovering over his name and not pressing it, of Diane sitting with me on Sunday evening so I wouldn't sit alone, of me learning the hardest lesson of all, which is that loving someone sometimes means letting the phone stay quiet. He lost the deal, of course. Friday came and went, and there was no deposit, and the guy vanished the way those men always do, and Danny lost the little he'd put in. I heard about it secondhand, through Diane, because he still wasn't speaking to me, and I won't pretend I didn't grieve it. I lay awake picturing him out there, angry and broke, and certain his own mother had thrown him to the wolves, and every cell in my body wanted to drive over and fix it. I didn't. That was the whole thing, wasn't it? For the first time in his life, I let my son stand in the cold long enough to feel it. Then, on a Thursday night, my phone rang. His name on the screen. My heart went straight up into my throat. He didn't say much at first. There was a long quiet, the kind where you can hear someone deciding whether to be honest. And then he told me he'd taken a job. Nothing glamorous, loading trucks on an overnight shift, but a real one, with a paycheck that was his. He said the work was hard and his back hurt, and he'd been thinking a lot, out there at 3 a.m. with nobody to bail him out. And then he said the thing I'd waited 30 years to hear him say, and he said it so quietly I almost missed it. He said, "I think I get it now, Mom. I think I finally get what you did. We're not fixed. I want to be honest with you, because I promised you that from the start. A wall 30 years in the making doesn't come down in one phone call. But he calls now, on his own, not because he needs something, just to talk. And every time he does, it's a man on the other end of the line instead of a boy waiting to be caught. That's not nothing. That's everything. As for me, I did a thing I hadn't done in longer than I can remember. I said yes to myself. That widower from church, the one with the kind eyes who'd asked me to dinner 3 times and gotten 3 no's, I called him back. We drove out to San Diego in the spring, and I stood on a beach and put my feet in the Pacific for the first time in my whole life, 55 years old, and I cried a little, and I laughed at myself for crying, and the water was so cold and so big, and it didn't need anything from me at all. I just got to stand there and be a person. Do you know how long it had been since I got to just be a person? I kept the retirement, by the way. Every dollar of it, safe behind that wall. It turns out you don't have to burn down your own future to prove you love your child. Sometimes the most loving thing, the hardest thing, is to protect the ground under your own feet so that one day they have to learn to find theirs. Karen Walsh, 55, and only now starting to live like the rest of my life belongs to me. There's someone I've been thinking about telling you about next. A woman who did everything right for her family, everything, and came home one ordinary afternoon to find they'd made a decision about her life without her in the room. What she did about it is a story I don't think you'll see coming. But that's for the next time we sit down together.